This is probably top 3 sort of thing that a CSM should be doing. You cannot understand value from a single angle. It's got to be multidimensional. You've got to be multi-threaded. All right, let's go. What's up, lifers, and welcome to the Daily Stand-Up with Lifetime Value, where we're giving you fresh new customer success ideas every single day. I got my man JP here. JP, do you want to say hi?
Hey, folks, what's going on?
And we've got Elizabeth here.
Hello, everyone.
Great to have you here, Elizabeth. And I am your host. My name is Dylan Young. Elizabeth, thank you so much for being here. Can you introduce yourself?
Absolutely. So I'm Elizabeth Italiano. Thank you for having me. It's nice to be here. I am the founder of What Not to Do. What Not to Do is all about helping people learn from my mistakes, because I have made a few in my career. So in my 19-year career in the industry across marketing, sales, customer success, all things go to market. I share a lot of content around things that work, but also things that do not work. So if you follow me on LinkedIn, every Friday I do a post called F Up Friday, which is literally sharing mistakes that I've done, but what I've learned and how I have fixed them going forward. We are also a customer success and sales consultancy. So we help teams to optimize their revenue, hit their targets, whether it's new business, renewal targets, and expansion targets. So if you're having trouble hitting your quota, you need some help with your go-to-market strategy and tactical execution, and you want to learn what not to do, then
that is a wide open blue ocean, right, of what not to do. I feel like that's a never-ending source of inspiration.
Oh, there's a lot.
Elizabeth,
my middle name.
What not to do? JP, what not to do?
JP, what not to do for us.
That's not difficult. I like it. I think we'll run with that. Elizabeth, you know what we're doing here? We ask every guest one single question, and that is, what is on your mind? It's usually about customer success, but you could expand it if you want to. So why don't you tell us what that is?
Well, we'll focus primarily on customer success, because I know that's the audience that typically tunes in and that you focus on. So what's on my mind is relationship and stakeholder mapping, and how I have seen, to be honest with you, some lower quality and missed opportunities in terms of how CSMs and AMs and AEs, although we will focus more on the post-sale side, are managing their stakeholder mapping efforts. I think it's one of the areas where, when we actually execute against it properly, it has an outsized impact when it comes to adoption, renewal, expansion, getting customer stories. That's what's on my mind. And I think that we can do a lot better in the industry in that.
JP, I'm going to hand it right over to you. And like, first blush, what do you think when Elizabeth explains that to you?
Yeah, so stakeholder mapping, if I'm not mistaken, we're talking about who we're talking to in an organization, right? So maybe I have a contact. This is the initial contact, someone that I meet who may or may not, and a lot of cases probably may not, be the actual person who signs off, who's like the decision maker, right? I know at my current job that this is something that's very important in terms of discovering who that is, because of course we know things could be going great. You can have someone who's having a great time using your product. They're realizing a lot of value, and they're always available to hop on a call. And yet they're churning. Why are they churning, right? Oftentimes it's a breakdown in, there's a difference between what we need to be communicating to someone who's like a power user or champion of our product versus someone who is the budget holder. And I think the way that I've heard this described is, we want to have more tactical conversations with our power users, and we want to have more strategic conversations with those who are more of those decision makers, those check signers, if you will. It is important to find a way to do some discovery. When I'm getting to know a client, I think that the best thing to do is to sort of get it done a bit earlier. I think earlier is almost better. Like, I was having a call today where I definitely just made it a point to say, hey, who else is using this product? How else are people using it? Are there different people in the organization? I know that sometimes that feels a little bit more salesy, and I think that may be the root of maybe why some CSMs may not be as good at the stakeholder mapping, what you may see, but embracing that role of being more curious. We preach being more curious all the time, and I think that's part of the way we want to be curious, is figuring out who's really signing the checks, who are your champions, because business is volatile, and at any minute, maybe you lose that champion, or you may even lose that decision maker. What if they get a different decision maker, and that decision maker was on board? Now you have a whole different thing. So I think that when it comes to the stakeholder mapping, I think that's something I would just say, get it done probably as early on as you can.
In my previous management experiences, one of the wasn't a primary KPI, maybe a secondary one under meeting set was those sort of like networking meetings. How many new individuals at an organization or within a department can you meet and just try to create relationships? JP, like you said, it can feel salesy, but at the end of the day, that's our job, right? We're trying to articulate value. We're trying to create as much stickiness as possible. And so you're not going to do that alone with just making a single person happy, sending them a bottle of wine at Christmas time. It's coming through articulating your value, trying to find other ways to be valuable to that customer. That's not sales. That's just good vendor work. But Elizabeth, tell me a little bit more about the way you teach this. Are there any fundamentals, any principles? Where do you typically start?
Yeah, absolutely. You've both touched on a few really important things. And one thing I will call out right away is that this isn't about being salesy. It's about identifying the perception of the value that we've delivered and what value and goals each stakeholder needs to see in order to get that renewal. And you mentioned being curious, JP. One of the things that we teach in our Quest to Quota attainment course is always be curious. We always have to be doing discovery and really identifying, what matters to each stakeholder. And the way I look at stakeholder mapping, and I also think it could maybe even use a rebranding, is that, okay, you have your stakeholders, this is their title, this is where they sit in their org chart. Okay, but who cares? So what? Like, why does that matter? And what do we do with this information? So the way I look at it is it's about influence mapping and it's about relationship mapping and doing discovery to identify what each stakeholder cares about. And it's our jobs, whether you are an AE, AM, or CSM, to understand, okay, who are the stakeholders? What do they care about? But how does that all tie together to an overarching company goal that's going to make your product and your solution a priority, that's going to make it a need to have as opposed to a nice to have? And how do you make sure that your solution stays relevant from now until your renewal comes up? The way that I look at mapping out stakeholders is who and where they fit into the org chart. That's table stakes, but that barely scratches the surface. We want to understand who actually holds the power. Is the person who signs the check that real true decision maker, or is there someone that has a ton of influence that is really calling the shots or bends the ear of the eventual signer of the renewal or the deal, whatever the case may be? Who are the advocates and the detractors? What is the tone in the room when they're talking about your solution internally? So hopefully your main point of contact is a true champion, because not all main points of contacts are a champion, and will help you gauge that. But you need to do discovery to really understand who your advocates, detractors, who's neutral. And so when you're not in the room, what's being said about your solution, and thinking through how you can engage with each of those stakeholders and thread a story to the overarching decision-making committee or buying committee when it comes to renewal time of, okay, JP, Dylan, Bob, Sue, Indu, Tiana, these are all the things that I've heard matter to you. Here's your goals, and this is what you're focused on. Okay, so now this is how it ties up to an overarching goal that we're all very focused on. And here's the similarities and like the ties that bind. if you aren't doing the relationship and influencer mapping and the stakeholder mapping, it becomes really hard to do that, to kind of weave that story and make sure that you are aligning your messaging, what you are promising that you can deliver with each of the stakeholders. And if you're not doing that, then it's really hard to get buy-in across the board. And the last thing I'll say on that is when we think about renewals now, it used to be 2 years ago that one person could sign off on a renewal. But now we have tech stacks that are getting reevaluated and people want to consolidate. There's too much tech in a lot of go-to-market teams now. There's a lot of consolidation happening. So when you're working with your stakeholders and you're mapping out their workflow and what matters to them and their goals, we need to identify where we fit in that in terms of workflow and how do we integrate with every possible stakeholder so that we are so enmeshed in their workflow that if anybody was to rip us out, it would be like, oh my God, how do I do my job? And if you can't do that, then you are at risk. It's not easy. Not saying it's easy.
Yeah, I want to make the joke, and I'm prefacing this because I don't actually believe it, but it's like, great, one more thing that a CSM needs to do. But what I actually think is, this is probably top 3 sort of thing that a CSM should be doing. It's not there. It supersedes a lot of other stuff. So this is a fantastic topic. I love that you called this out. But this is a great thing to kind of say, like, hey guys, if this is in your blind spot currently, get it out of there, because you cannot be single threaded within an organization. You cannot understand value from a single angle. It's got to be multidimensional. You've got to be multi-threaded. So I love this, Elizabeth. Thank you so much for bringing this to our attention. We do have to say goodbye for now, but please come back soon.
I would love to come back, and thank you again for having me.
You've been listening to the Daily Stand-Up by Lifetime Value. Please note that the views expressed in these conversations are attributed only to those individuals on this recording and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of their respective employers. For all inquiries, please reach out via email to dylan@lifetimevaluemedia.com. Find us on YouTube at Lifetime Value, and find us on the socials at Lifetime Value Media. Until next time.